Good morning, folks. That's morning for me. So, anyways, today I'm going to be reading you Chapter 2 from my book, Blood of the Wolf. You can find it on Amazon.com and available on paperback and Kindle. You can also find it on BarnesandNoble.com. I'm going to be putting links down below in the descriptions, and you'll also be able to find the same links up in the banner for my channel, my page. Make sure you do like and subscribe. Also hit the notification bell if you want to hear more content like this, where on this channel I will be reading stories aloud, starting with my books, but we're going to hope to expand that more into other authors being able to come on here and kind of promote their own works by reading you guys free stories. So without further ado, here we go. We are on to Chapter 2. Chapter 2, Awakenings. Michael had been thrashing around in his sleep, and it had woken Lisa up, so she was shaking him, trying to wake him up. "Michael, wake up! Wake up!" Startled, Michael opened his eyes to see Lisa leaning over him, shaking him awake. "You're having a bad dream. I've been trying to wake you up. You've been thrashing around for the past few minutes." Michael reached out and clutched Lisa in his arms, as a few tears rolled down his cheeks. What did he mean by "the time of the awakening is upon me"? It doesn't make any sense. Who? The Black Wolf from my visions. Just then they heard a knock at the door, and they heard his mom's voice on the other side. "Michael, honey, can I talk to you for a minute?" Michael looked over at the clock and saw it was 3 a.m. He looked back at Lisa with a look of confusion. "I hope she's all right." "I'll be right out, Mom. Just let me get something on." He walked out to find his mother sitting at the kitchen table, with a cup of coffee and a concerned look on her face. He pointed to the cup in her hand. "Yeah, that stuff's going to keep you up all night." Angela looked down at the cup of coffee and smiled. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept a wink. "I haven't been able to sleep. I've had a lot on my mind. I'm sorry, but I couldn't help but overhear your conversation in there, especially the part about the Black Wolf." "Oh, Mom, it's nothing. Don't worry about it. It's just a dream. Please don't tell Dad." Angela shook her head and almost laughed at the thought of it. "Don't worry. I wouldn't tell that fruitcake anything. However, I do need to explain a few things to you surrounding the time span in which you were conceived." Michael sighed as if it were a story he had heard over and over again. "Oh, Mom, does this have anything to do with Dad referring to me as your little accident?" "Not entirely. There's a lot more to the story I had left out for your own protection." Michael seemed a little more concerned now as he took a seat at the table across from her and leaned in with interest. "Mom, what do you mean? You're beginning to scare me a little." Angela went on to explain to Michael the events that took place the night she was abducted. She told him about the wolves in lab coats and the tube with the fluid in it. That part made him a little sick. When she finished, Michael was sitting at the table with a look of utter disbelief and astonishment at his mother's tale. Lisa sat in on the bed with her eyes wide and her jaw dropped, because she could hear everything through the crack in the door. Michael slid his chair back and stood up from the table. He was frustrated and almost angry at everything he was hearing. "And my father said I was crazy. It's common to know that it runs in the family." Angela reached out for him, but he pulled away. "Michael, I'm telling you the truth." "Oh, come on, Mom. Do you really expect me to believe you were abducted and that I am the result of some strange experiment performed on you by alien wolves? For God's sakes, Mom, go to bed." "That's where I'm going back to. I have to get up for school in a while." He ran his fingers through his hair and shook his head in disbelief as he walked back to his room. Angela hung her head and began to cry a little. He found Lisa sitting up waiting for him to return. "Did you hear any of that?" Lisa was still very wide-eyed and looking very confused. "Uh-huh, every word. And I think the whole time my dad had me in therapy. She was the one that really needed it." Lisa looked like she began to ponder everything Angela had said. "But what if?" Michael cocked his head to the side. "What do you mean, what if?" "What if she was telling the truth and you are some kind of alien wolf? I mean, you are quite an animal in bed." Michael ran his tongue over his teeth like he should have seen it coming. He was amused by Lisa poking fun at him, but he thought to himself, paybacks are a bitch. That's it. Now you're going to get it. Lisa screamed with a look of surprise as Michael quickly threw off his sweats and jumped on top of her. He began tickling her relentlessly, which quickly turned into passionate kissing and fondling. The festivities continued until it was time for them to get ready for school. Michael gave his mom a hug and a kiss before they all left to catch the bus. She may be crazy, but he still loved her more than anything in the world. On the way to school, Alan kept shaking his head and muttering to himself. Michael gave Lisa a confused look and then looked over at Alan. Dude, what is your problem? You look like a nutbag. Alan looked up at the both of them as they stared at him in confusion. Huh? Oh, sorry. I was thinking about a dream I was having the other night. I was getting rubbed down and having sex with a bunch of hot, naked strippers. When out of nowhere, someone started yelling something about alien wolves doing experiments on people. That's where the dream ends. Didn't make any sense. What do you think it means? Michael had a bit of a dumbfounded look on his face, unsure of how to respond. Lisa came to his rescue, though. I think it means you need to stop eating so much junk before bed. Now, come on. We're going to be late for school. Alan laughed and nodded his head. You're probably right. Lisa looked up at Michael and smiled as he leaned down and kissed her. That's why I love you. Lisa smiled and squeezed Michael's hand. When they got to school, the rest of the guys in the band were waiting on the steps for them. Michael knew it was time to humble himself and make his apologies. Jason was first to approach him. So what was up with that last night? You too cool now, or do we need to call Oprah and let her hear your sob story? Alan smiled and puffed out his chest. Nah, we're all good. After you guys left, I kicked Michael's ass, he gave me some head, and everything was back to normal. Lisa got a sick look on her face and looked like she almost threw up in her mouth. I knew there was something going on between the two of you. Michael shoved Alan a little. Yeah, but I remember it the other way around. Jason gagged and held up his hand as if to say he'd heard enough. TMFI, you guys are fucking sick. Just then the bell rang and everyone started heading to class. Before going in, Jason stopped everyone to ask them a very important question. So we're still on for the concert tonight? Yeah. Okay, just checking. I'll see you guys after school. They all waved as they parted ways to go into class. Michael and Lisa gave each other a kiss as they parted. Lisa looked up at Michael and ran her fingers through his hair. Don't worry about all that stuff your mom said last night, about the wolves and you being some test tube alien baby. She's under a lot of stress. She's trying to be quiet, hoping no one else would overhear. However, Alan, having remembered he had a question he wanted to ask Michael, walked back up just in time to hear Lisa's comment. His eyes got wide, and he got an ear-to-ear grin on his face. I knew I heard something about that last night. I wasn't dreaming. Lisa's face sunk as she turned to see Alan wide-eyed and pointing in their direction. He walked up beside Michael and motioned for him to come closer. Michael leaned in to hear what Alan was about to say. Dude, you're a test tube doggy. Michael reached out to grab Alan, but he was already running down the hall. He and Lisa both chased Alan down the hall, but he ran into his class and shut the door before they could catch him. He stood at the window making faces at them and laughing before finally going and taking a seat. After school, they all rushed home to get ready for the concert. Michael kept giving Alan a look of question as to when he would bring it up again. He trusted him enough to know that he wouldn't go starting rumors, but this gave Alan an endless array of ammo to poke fun at him. Lisa lived right next door, so she told Michael she'd come over in about an hour after she showered and got ready. Alan and Michael rushed to get ready themselves because they didn't want to be late, even though the concert wasn't for another 4 hours. Angela made dinner at about 5 for all of them because she knew they had someplace to be. Dinner time was a bit tense after the conversation that morning. Angela looked across the table at Michael. I'm sorry for dumping all that on you last night, Michael. I know you don't need it right now. It's okay, Mom. I just didn't know what to say. What'd you want me to say? Wasn't expecting you to say anything. I just thought you deserved to know. Alan walked in on the conversation as he was drying his hair with a towel and sitting down at the table to eat. Know what? Nothing, man. Mom was just crying about some things my dad had said around the time I was born. Stuff about me being an accident and things like that. Alan looked over at Angela. No, Mom, don't worry. We all know how much of an asshole that guy is. He can't hurt you anymore. He put a hand on Michael's shoulder and looked at him with a smirk. Michael closed his eyes out of frustration, braced himself for Alan's next remark that he could almost feel coming. All forms of logic are alien to that guy. Angela gave a half-hearted smile as she squeezed Michael's hand. Michael just looked at Alan and growled, to which he responded with a mischievous smile. They heard the knob turn on the door, and they all looked to see Lisa come in. Smells good. What's for dinner? Angela pointed to the pot of spaghetti sitting on the table. Spaghetti, do you want some? Oh, thanks. We have to get going. It's going to take about an hour to get to the concert, and there's going to be a line. You sure? There's plenty. You know how much I love your spaghetti, but we really have to go. Michael and Alan wiped their faces and took their plates to the sink. Angela waved them along towards the door. Just leave those plates there, guys. I'll clean up. Okay, Mom. Michael walked over and threw his arms around Lisa. He picked her up by her butt and kissed her as she threw her legs around him. Michael looked at the outfit she had on and gave her a very hungry look. You know how much it turns me on when you dress up like a rocker chick. How about later we put those spiked cuffs to some good use? You know I wear it just for you. Michael kissed her again and put her down, smiling. Alan, who had been watching them the whole time, was now staring directly at Lisa's protruding nipples with a big smile. Looks like it's cold outside. Lisa pushed at her chest, making her boobs bulge even more, as she started rubbing and squeezing her nipples. She tried to use her best pouting lip and seductive sex vixen routine, as she batted her eyes at both of them. I know, and they need so much attention from a big, strong man who wants to help keep them warm. Michael and Alan looked at each other like hungry, drooling dogs. Of course, Michael had to slap Alan's hand away as he reached out for them. No, my job. Oh, man, you're no fun. It's okay, you're still my dog. Lisa and Angela just laughed. Michael shook his head and grumbled as he wondered how long Alan would keep this line of jokes up. Angela waved to them and gave them all hugs as they headed out the door. You kids be careful tonight. We will. They all got to the concert just in time to wait in line. It wasn't that long, but it was a little cold outside, so the line was still moving a bit slow for their taste. Just as they were getting up to the door, Alan noticed some guys across the street pointing at them and saying some crude things about Lisa. He tugged on Michael's shirt to get his attention. When Michael looked over at him to see what he wanted, Alan pointed across the street as the guys stood up trying to act tough. They've been pointing over here and saying some pretty crude things about Lisa. Michael looked over in their direction like a dog guarding his yard against intruders. And to him, these guys looked like they needed a chunk taken out of their ass. Wait here. As Michael started to move across the street, Lisa stopped him. Don't waste your time on those assholes. Besides, I can take care of myself. Lisa walked out to the curb, turned, and slapped her ass. Little bitches want this ass, don't you? Then she turned around and squeezed her tits as she taunted them some more. My man's cock's bigger than your left arm. You fuckers don't stand a chance. Everyone in line started laughing at the guys across the street as she walked back towards Michael and Alan. One of the punks threw down his beer and started crossing the street. Michael stepped towards him, but the bouncer pushed him back this time. He grabbed the guy by the throat and tossed him back as he ushered Michael, Alan, and Lisa through the door. Don't worry, we got this. You guys go have fun. Lisa looked up at him and smiled. Thanks. Don't mention it. Been looking for some action all night. The bouncer cracked his knuckles and moved towards the punks that were still trying to get at Michael and Lisa. Michael just shook his head and laughed as he put his arm around Lisa and turned to head inside. The concert that night kicked ass. The opening act was Limp Bizkit, which kind of sucked. But Five Finger Death Punch rocked. Michael had Lisa up on his shoulders, and she was flashing the lead singer. She kept running her fingers through his hair as she sang along. The lead singer even pointed at him at one point and told him he was a lucky motherfucker. Michael just smiled and squeezed Lisa's legs. He didn't need anyone to tell him. He was happy every day he got to have her by his side. On the way out the door, Michael shook the bouncer's hand and Lisa gave him a big kiss on the cheek. For some reason, Michael had a bad feeling as they stepped outside, though. The night had gone so well he couldn't figure out what could be wrong. They walked a few blocks towards the bus stop before they heard a bottle clank on the concrete down in one of the loading dock areas of a nearby building that was closed for the night. One by one, the punks from earlier started stepping out of the shadows and walking their way, looking like they were ready for a fight. One of them was sporting a black eye from his encounter earlier with the bouncer. Well, if it isn't the pretty little bitch that we're going to be fucking tonight. I'm going to make you scream when I rape your little ass. Michael didn't even get a chance to react before Alan started moving towards him and talking shit. What'd you say, bitch? I'm going to fuck you up. Alan ran at the guy, but he already had a knife drawn, and he plunged it into Alan's stomach. The shock on Alan's face and the realization of what would just happen drove Michael into a rage, and he moved in, ready to kill. The rest of the gang started walking up. I got this motherfucker, Taz. As one of the guys approaching Michael said this, he pulled a gun and fired at him. Michael tried to react, but he couldn't dodge a bullet. The slug struck him in the forehead, and he stood rigid for a moment before falling backwards. Lisa screamed as two others grabbed her and started dragging her away, tearing her shirt and squeezing her breasts. They began laughing and describing in detail what they were going to do to her. We're filling every little hole you got tonight, bitch. We're going to make you scream. We're going to make you bleed. As Michael was falling backwards, everything seemed to be happening in slow motion, and he could see the clouds churning overhead. He began to wonder if this was really how he was going to die, and if there was no light, then where he was going. Oh, then where was he going? Suddenly a bolt of lightning streaked down out of the sky and struck him in the head. He heard a booming voice in his head that felt like it was shaking the very ground beneath him. It's time for you to awaken. As the electricity coursed through his body, he could feel a tingling pain throughout his entire body, and his muscles felt as if they would tear right out of his skin. Every part of him hurt, even his teeth. All Michael could feel was the rage and an unyielding drive to rain vengeance down upon those that would victimize the ones he loved. He stood upright and could see the scum that was dragging away the woman he loved. He didn't see them as people anymore, just targets that needed to be destroyed. As he moved towards them, it only took a matter of seconds, because they were no more than 10 feet away. Michael moved like quicksilver as he reached out and grabbed the first guy by the back of his neck and squeezed. He felt his fingers sink through flesh and muscle as he grasped his spine and twisted with an awful crunch. He tossed that one to the side as the next one closest turned to greet this new attacker. Michael lunged for his throat and slammed him into a street sign behind him. He crushed it until he could feel his fingers wrap around the pole itself. He jerked the pole free from the ground, along with some of the concrete that held it in place. The metal gave an awful groan as he wielded it with amazing speed and agility. The third guy turned just in time to see this horrific club careening towards his skull. It collided with such an impact that it crushed him and the cement beneath where he stood. The fourth guy, that he now knew to be named Taz, pushed Lisa in front of him, like the coward he was, and seemed to offer her up as a sacrifice to save his own ass. What are you? Stay away from me! Taz threw Lisa to the side and tried to run, but Michael was too fast. He grabbed him by his shirt with both hands and lifted him up face to face. He could see the fury and bright red glow coming from his own eyes as he stared into the eyes of his prey. Taz began crying and pleading for his life. Michael could smell and hear the urine running down his legs. What are you? Please don't kill me! Why would I show mercy to one who shows none? With that, Michael thrust out both his arms, releasing Taz with such a force that he flew back 15 feet and through the door of a parked car. He hit it with such a force that the car itself lurched to the side a few feet. Michael let out a terrifying growl that turned into a howl. He looked over to where Lisa lay on the ground. She was picking herself up, but as she turned around, she was startled to see a red glow in Michael's eyes beginning to dim down. It scared her for a moment, but the fear was overpowered by the joy that he was still alive. She didn't know how, but he was. Then the horrifying remembrance of Alan's plight hit her. Michael, where's Alan? Michael ran to the side of his friend, who was slumped over just down the block. Alan was clutching his stomach as it was pulsing blood with each pump of his heart, and it was slowly fading. Michael pressed on the wound to try and stop the bleeding and looked into his friend's eyes. Alan was getting pale, and he was crying. Michael, I don't want to die. Please don't let me die. Lisa was frantic and pacing back and forth crying, not sure if there was anything that could be done. Michael, we have to get him to a hospital. As the emotion from the moment began to overwhelm him, Michael started crying. I don't know if we can get him there in time. Michael yelled for someone to call 911. He held Alan close to him, wishing he could save his friend's life, his best friend in the world. Just when Michael thought there was no hope, he began to feel a tingling in his head that moved down his neck and through his arm to the hand that was pressing on Alan's wound. A green glow began radiating from the palm of his hand, and Alan began to grimace in pain. Startled, Michael slowly pulled his hand away, but the glow continued. The blood had stopped pumping out of Alan's wound in his stomach, and was beginning to close on its own. When it was all healed, there was only a barely noticeable scar, covered in a lot of blood. Alan let out a gasp of air and looked at Michael in astonishment. What just happened? Michael was still looking down at his hand, trying to figure that question out for himself. I have no idea. What's happening to me? Lisa started tugging on Michael and Alan's shirts, pleading with them to get up and start moving. There's no time. We have to get out of here. The police are on their way. Looking around at the carnage, Michael quickly agreed and helped Alan to his feet. Let's find a payphone and call a cab. Whatever that crazy electrical storm was, it fried my cell phone. Lisa and Alan just looked at each other and then back at Michael. What electrical storm? And that concludes Chapter 2. So again, please do like, subscribe, hit the notification bell for Chapter 3. And I will be back with that installment soon. All right, guys. Thank you.